The rank 4 toolbox is home to some of the most widely used and loved cards in the game due to the widespread prevalence of level 4 monsters. But if you reach too deep into this toolbox, you'll find that even rank 4s have their fair share of awful cards. Though, shockingly, some of them still have seen competitive play by virtue of just raw accessibility. Today, we'll be identifying the worst rank 4 monsters currently in the game, what makes them so bad, and the legacies of those who have seen the field of battle. And at number 10, we have number 85, Crazy Box. This convoluted cube has 3000 attack and requires you to overlay 2 level 4 monsters in order to summon, but it cannot attack. As a soft once per turn, you can detach a material from Crazy Box to roll a 6-sided die and perform one of 6 effects depending on the result. If the result is 1, you have your life points. If it's 2, you draw a card. 3, your opponent discards 1 card. 4, you can negate the effects of any face-up card in the field for the rest of the turn. 5, you destroy 1 card in the field. Or 6, Crazy Box destroys itself. In addition to being one of my favorite cards of all time, Crazy Box is also a terrible card, with only a chance of providing a beneficial effect for the investment of 2 level 4 monsters. Out of its 6 effects, 2 of them are extremely bad, but the remaining 4 are quite good. Drawing cards and hand disruption are 2 of the best effects in the game, and neither of its negates nor destruction effects target, allowing Crazy Box to bypass the protection of certain cards. However, its remaining effects to have your life points or self-destruct are awful and can lose you the game on the spot. While the majority of Crazy Box effects are incredible, the randomness as to which effect you get is what ruins its playability. If you took any of its good effects and put it on a more generic rank 4 Xyz monster, especially its non-targeting negate or pop of any card in the field, the monster would find himself amongst the best situational rank 4s in the game. The fact that you can't guarantee which effect you get, or even if you'll get a good effect at all, keeps Crazy Box in check. However, you might be surprised to hear that despite being one of the worst rank 4 monsters in the game, Crazy Box has actually seen competitive play in the past. Crazy Box boasts by far the highest attack stat of a generic rank 4 monster at 3000, and in 2014, many decks played it as a way to get the upper hand while under the effects of Skill Drain. This is because Skill Drain can negate Crazy Box's effect that prevents it from attacking, making it into an easy access 3k beatstick during a format where the only monsters this combo couldn't beat over was Apocalypse Towers. In fact, this combo was so powerful that even decks that didn't play Skill Drain would consider playing Crazy Box so they could take advantage of this interaction as a backup plan in case their opponent flips Skill Drain to stop their turn. Not unlike modern decks that play Lingerubo as a preemptive out to Nightmare Corrupt or Ebly, even if they don't play Cyberse monsters themselves. However, as more comprehensive and consistent ways out cards like Skill Drain have been released, and extra deck space has only grown tighter and tighter, Crazy Box has fallen far out of favor to reclaim its place as one of the worst rank 4 monsters in the game. And pondering their position and possibly regretting prior life choices at number 9 is Fairy King Albverdich, which has 2300 attack and requires 2 level 4 earth monsters in order to summon. All it has is the simple once per turn effect to detach material from itself to make all non-earth monsters in the field lose 500 attack and defense. Fairy King Albverdich has a lot of factors working against it. Its summoning condition of 2 level 4 earth monsters is already rough since earth is one of the weakest types in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! But even despite this restriction, the attack and defense modifier it provides is lackluster at best. While attack and defense modifiers were once an important part of the game, modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is so focused on quick effect negates and board interaction that such an extremely telegraphed minor battle trick is laughable, if not downright useless. This is why it might surprise you to find out that back in 2013, Fairy King Albverdich actually did see a short period of competitive play as a way to out some somewhat large monsters due to the stat modification it applies being permanent. Machina Yugioh was an incredibly short-lived strategy that primarily focused on spamming level 4 bodies to turbo out the rightfully banned number 16 Shockmaster, and Albverdich just so happened to fit the bill as a monster that uniquely this deck can employ in its arsenal. However, even as far back as 10 years ago, Fairy King Albverdich was a suspect inclusion that not all Machina Gear decks at this time chose to play, emphasizing just how bad this card is. And slashing into number 8, we have Zubaba General, which has 2000 attack and requires any 2 level 4 monsters in order to make. It has 2 effects, the first of which allows you to, once per turn, detach material from itself to equip a warrior type monster from your hand to itself. This enables its second effect, which makes Zubaba General gain attack equal to the combined attack of all monsters equipped to it by its own effect. Zubaba General might not initially look that bad of a card when compared to Fairy King Albverdich, which Zubaba General Summoning Condition is at least generic. While this is true and is technically a benefit, it's practically irrelevant since its effect to gain attack requires an additional third monster in order to use, and specifically requires a warrior monster at that. This severely limits the amount of decks that can play it, and makes using Zubaba General a huge commitment of 3 cards that can instantly lose you the game if things go awry. However, similarly to Albverdich, Zubaba General has actually seen a brief time in the spotlight, this time during 2015's Necros format. At this time in Yu-Gi-Oh!, the two primary meta threats were Qliphort and the format's namesake, Necros. Zubaba General found itself in a handful of Necros lists as a way to best Qliphort's defining boss monster, Apocryphal Towers, in battle by overlaying 2 level 4 monsters for Zubaba General, and then equipping a copy of Necros Atrishula from their hand to Zubaba General to pump it to a grand total of 4,700 attack. This was way more than enough to beat Towers' 3,000 attack, even after applying its stat drain of 500 to drop Zubaba General to 4,200. However, outside of this single edge case interaction, Zubaba General has seen absolutely no competitive play before or since due to its comparatively lackluster payoff for the 3-card investment required to make use of it. And searing at number 7, we have Infernal Flame Vixen, which requires 2 level 4 pyro monsters in order to summon and has 2,200 attack. It has 2 effects, the first of which allows it to detach material from itself to gain 500 attack until your opponent's end phase once per turn. Its second effect triggers upon being destroyed while it has 2,500 or more attack, and allows you to target 3 monsters in either graveyard and banish them. Infernal Flame Vixen is a deceptive card that appears to be worse than it is at first glance. While its second effect to banish cards in the graveyard only triggers when it's destroyed while it has 2,500 more attack, Infernal Flame Vixen can actually facilitate the stat requirement by itself by using its first effect to increase its attack to 2,700. The fact that this lasts until your opponent's end phase also allows you to keep it on the field to trigger later on in your opponent's turn to be used as interruption, should you have a way to destroy it. While there are some decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! That like to banish their own cards, this effect is primarily useful at disrupting your opponent's graveyard by banishing important garnets or combo pieces. DD Crow is a popular meta staple that frequently dips in and out of competitive play as a way to check graveyard-reliant strategies, and on paper, Infernal Flame Vixen should be able to do this 3 times as well. However, the main reason Infernal Flame Vixen is such a bad card and doesn't see play is its summoning requirement. It requires 2 level 4 pyro monsters, which is one of the worst types in the game in terms of available archetypes and generic support. While the pyro typing has received recent support and has more on the way, none of it encourages the use of Infernal Flame Vixen. In fact, it's actually received a retrain in the form of Infernal Flame Banshee, which can, at the cost of any 2 level 4 monsters, add to your hand or send to your graveyard any pyro monster from your deck. A much better effect on an easier to summon monster that pyro decks are much more likely to make effective use of. And soaring into number 6 is Knight Papilloperative. It has 2,600 attack, requires 3 level 4 monsters in order to summon, and can, once per turn, detach material from itself to gain 300 attack for every Xyz material attached to monsters on the field. Summoned properly onto an empty field using 3 level 4 monsters, activating Knight Papilloperative's effect will raise its attack stat to 3,100. For the same level of investment, you can summon an Evil Swarm Ouroboros and either return a card your opponent controls to the hand, send a random card your opponent's hand to the graveyard, or target a card in your opponent's graveyard and banish it. You can also summon Teller Knight Tolmaius and use this effect to summon Cyber Dragon Nova, and then overlay into Cyber Dragon Infinity on top of that for an easy to access Omni Negate. If you're more combo oriented, making Prime Mathmech Albertian using 3 materials allows you to add any level 4 monster from your deck to your hand. No matter how you slice it, under no circumstances is Knight Papilloperative worth the 3 materials required to make it. While its scaling attack bonus could result in some funny interactions in very specific scenarios, no attack bonus is worth the investment of 3 level 4 bodies on the field. Knight Papilloperative's only saving grace are that it accepts generic materials in order to summon, and that its attack gain is permanent, allowing it to slowly scale with time should your opponent elect to completely ignore the obvious, unprotected 3k beatstick on your side of the field. And frolicking into number 5 is number 8 Heraldic King Genom-Heritage. It requires 2 level 4 Heraldic Beast monsters as materials, and can, once per turn, target an Xyz monster your opponent controls to copy its name, stats, and effects, and then reduce that targeted monster's attack to 0 and negate its effects until the end phase. While situational, Genom-Heritage's effect to copy and negate an opponent's Xyz monster is incredible. Effect copying is one of the common themes found amongst cards in the Forbidden Limited list because it allows you to circumvent restrictions implemented to facilitate game balance. Even though Genom-Heritage can only copy the effects of an opponent's monster, there are plenty of Xyz monsters in the game that have effects that would be worth copying. If you could summon Genom-Heritage to your field. Since Genom-Heritage requires 2 Heraldic Beast monsters as material to summon, you are effectively locked into playing Heraldic Beast if you want to use it. This relatively small archetype comprises entirely of level and rank 4 monsters, and even comes packaged with some shockingly good modern spell cards that easily facilitate an Xyz summon of Heraldic Beast monsters. However, that's all the deck does. It effectively locks you into summoning exclusively one of its 2 in-archetype Xyz monsters, of which Genom-Heritage is technically the worst of, and then leaves you a sitting duck for a myriad of OTK tools to clean up and claim an easy victory. If your Genom-Heritage didn't require specifically Heraldic Beast monsters, it may have actually seen competitive play at some point, but in reality its legacy is only one of wasted cardboard and ink. And fusing potions at number 4 is Alchemic Magician, which requires 3 level 4 spellcasters in order to summon. It gains 200 attack for each spell card in your graveyard, and can, during your end phase, detach a material from itself and send a card from your hand to the graveyard once per turn in order to set any spell from your deck directly into your spell and trap card zone. Searching any spell in the game is a straight up broken effect. There are simply too many spell cards that have been released throughout Yu-Gi-Oh's long history that would instantly enable numerous FTKs or unbreakable boards if they ever became easily or consistently accessible. In fact, this effect is so powerful that many FTK decks will spin their wheels for minutes performing long-winded combos simply in order to search out and loop a specific card from their deck, the end goal often being a spell card without a hard once per turn. Even the currently unlimited Triple Tactics Thrust is under community scrutiny as a card potentially destined for the Forbidden Limitless, despite its heavy restrictions and a harsh activation requirement for its effect to either search or set any normal spell or trap card from your deck. So if searching for any spell is such a strong effect, then what makes Alchemic Magician a bad card? Well, it has 3 glaring issues that, when combined, have prevented it from seeing even fringe play. The first of which, like many other cards in this list, is its summoning requirement. Requiring 3 level 4 monsters in the field is bad enough, but requiring that they be spellcasters specifically makes it even more difficult to summon. However, there are some Pendulum decks that could technically stomach this requirement, and it's been proven time and time again that Pendulum pilots are more than willing to pull off long and difficult FTK combos, even in a tournament. Next, in order to activate Alchemic Magician's effect to search a spell, you have to discard a card on top of its already expensive summoning requirement. For the sake of this argument, we'll disregard this discard and say that this hypothetical Pendulum deck can generate enough advantage where committing 4 cards to the single play isn't a problem. It's the last and harshest restriction which is the real nail in the coffin for Alchemic Magician. That being the fact you can only activate its effect to search during your end phase. Unlike Triple Tactics Thrust or Primal Seed loops, the spell card you want to search out is only available after it's too late to use it, since you can only activate normal and continuous spell cards during your main phase, but at least you'll be able to use a quick play spell as soon as your opponent's turn starts. At this point, your opponent will have their entire first turn to play before it becomes your turn. Since Alchemic Magician sets a spell from your deck to your field, your opponent will clearly see which zone that spell was set in, painting a target on that card that practically begs your opponent to take proactive action and remove it before it becomes a problem during your turn again. Now, while you can use this effect to search any quick play spell to activate during your opponent's turn, there's not a single target in the game worth the ludicrous investment required to make use of Alchemic Magician. However, if a quick play spell so powerful that it effectively instantly wins the game is ever released, Alchemic Magician may eventually find itself a home in competitive deck lists, and this lack of future-proofing is what prevents it from being any higher on this list. And warping into number 3 is Unformed Void, which has 0 attack and defense and requires 3 level 4 monsters in order to summon. Once per turn, as a quick effect during your opponent's main phase, you can detach material from itself in order to use its effect to have it gain attack and defense equal to the total attack of all face-up Xyz monsters your opponent currently controls. While quite similar to Papilloperative in that it requires 3 materials to summon and its only effect is to gain stats, Unformed Void manages to take all of the worst parts of Papilloperative and push them a step further. First, unlike Papilloperative, which can gain attack based on the materials of monsters on either side of the field on top of its base attack of 2600, Unformed Void explicitly requires your opponent to have Xyz monsters on the field in order to gain any stats at all, leaving it a 0/0 sitting duck if your opponent just normal summons a monster with any attack, goes to the battle phase, and destroys it before committing to any other plays. However, if your opponent refuses to read and commits to an Xyz monster anyways, and attempts to proceed to the battle phase, you're still out of luck. Despite Unformed Void's stat modifying effect being a quick effect, it can only be used during your opponent's main phase. This locks you out of the one benefit that stat modifying quick effects typically have over other quick effects, that being the ability to be activated during the damage step where only activations, not effects, can be negated. This prevents you from even surprising your opponent after they've already declared an attack on a 0/0 monster, since you have to use Unformed Void's effect before your opponent leaves their main phase, giving them the option to stay in their main phase and clear it before re-attempting to enter the battle phase. However, this is all also assuming that your opponent even plays Xyz monsters, which isn't guaranteed in a game as diverse as Yu-Gi-Oh! In order for Unformed Void to do anything, your opponent has to blindly and ignorantly play into it. And even then, the payoff of a stat copying beatstick is comparatively nothing for the investment required to summon it. The only reason it isn't higher on this list is because the stats it gains are permanent, allowing Unformed Void to, in best case scenario, stack stats turn after turn until it becomes an insurmountable beatstick that can one-shot your opponent. And fluttering into number 2 is Photon Alexandra Queen. At the cost of 2 Butter Spy monsters, you can summon this card and use its effect to detach material from itself and return all monsters on the field to the hand, inflicting 300 damage to each player for each card returned to their respective hand. If Heraldic King Genom-Heritage is an example of what happens when you give a bad archetype a good card, then Photon Alexandra Queen is an example of what happens when you give a non-existent archetype a fantastic card. Photon Alexandra Queen's effect to bounce all monsters in the field functions as a combined version of 2 of the best Xyz monsters in the game: Divine Arsenal AA Zeus Sky Thunder and Super Star Slayer Typhon Sky Crisis. Inflicting burn damage to each player based on the amount of monsters they had in the field is just icing on the cake, adding to its overall utility as not only a board wipe but also a staple for winning Game 3 in a tournament match setting. However, the fatal flaw of Photon Alexandra Queen lies in its summoning requirement of 2 Butter Spy monsters, of which there are only 3. Of the 4 monsters in the game that mention Butter Spy, Moonlit Papillon and Blue Mountain Butter Spy actually aren't half bad, but they don't have any real support that helps facilitate them as their own strategy. To make it clear how small Butter Spy is, what you see on screen is the entire archetype. There are only 6 cards that mention Butter Spy in the entire game, and only half of them would be good enough to be considered playable, given a future wave of support. Unlike most of the cards on this list, Photon Alexandra Queen could potentially become a really good card in the future, since its only limiting factor is its summon condition and lack of a fully fleshed out archetype. If Butter Spy ever receives modern support, this card has a legitimate chance at seeing competitive play. But don't get your hopes up. It's unlikely this will ever happen, considering that Konami has left Butter Spy untouched for over 10 years. But the potential this card has prevents it from taking the number 1 spot on this list. And riding gallantly into number 1 is number 44 Sky Pegasus. Requiring any 2 level 4 monsters in order to summon, its effect allows you to, once per turn, target a face-up monster your opponent controls and destroy it unless your opponent pays 1000 life points to negate the effect. On a list full of 3 material, overly specific and stat-modifying monsters, it may surprise you to see a generic rank 4 that only requires 2 materials and comes with a pop at the top of this list. While a monster destroy is technically a good effect to have on a generic rank 4, in the end, it's about being able to consistently access that pop at times when it really matters. The fact that Sky Pegasus comes with a built-in counterplay that allows your opponent to pay 1000 life points to negate its effect to destroy is horrendous. There's no incentive for your opponent to ever not pay its cost, leaving you with your hopes, dreams, and an 1800 attack beatstick to try and out whatever board your opponent has put up. Considering that Sky Pegasus is a generic 2-link rank 4, it means it's also competing with an incredibly wide array of premier toolbox options and effects, many of which can be game-winning on their own. If you need a board wipe to turn a losing game on its head, Evil Swarm Excited Knight has your back. Need to stall out a lingering floodgate? Just make Baguska. If your opponent's graveyard effects are giving you trouble, try making Abyss Dweller. The competition in the generic rank 4 pool is fierce, and Sky Pegasus doesn't even begin to make the cut. Even compared to the number 10 spot on this list, Sky Pegasus makes Crazy Box look like a premier boss monster, solidly earning its number 1 spot on this list. Alright, and that's the list. If there were any other awful rank 4 monsters you think we may have missed, or if you have any ideas for future videos just like this one, please let us know down in the comments below.